Yeah, in terms of the rugby, it's unfortunate that we're going to have to call Joe into a bit of question, because we're going to open with. Yeah, you're obviously proud enough. We're displaying our colours proudly.
Listen, we've been in worse situations and have to display the colours. You
have
know,
to take it on the chin.
Yeah,
it was, to be fair, and we were amongst a multitude of media influences and people talking on the game who were kind of writing England off, but also bigging Ireland up pre-game. We were certainly asking questions of Eddie Jones. We were asking questions of the centre pairing. We were asking questions about their back row.
Yeah,
drawing on all evidence based on last year. But this was they came in with a plan. They came in. They looked much more like an English team than I've seen in a while, and I'll get into what I mean by that. But it was not refreshing. It was refreshing from a rugby point of view, not so much from an Irish point of view.
No, totally. Yeah, listen, we have been. And I would say I would probably call myself out more than you in terms of being, gung ho, quite critical of them. Like, I still have those questions. I still think that I feel like they've stumbled into the Tuilagi selection, which was definitely
he was
valuable.
always he's been plagued with injury, but given a run of games, they were always going to try and get him back in there. But it was
in the absence of him, I don't know if anyone could fill those shoes from a defensive perspective. I have quibbles with the back three, and Daly went well at the weekend, but I have quibbles with the back row and everything else. I think they should be looking to play a bit more like Saracens, but so eager have I been to make that point in general that I think that we've made it in the context of discussing England and Eddie Jones virtually every time they've come up.
Yeah.
So it's worth devoting some time to talking about just how right they got this weekend in every department.
Yeah.
I mean, just how.
Yeah, and that was the story of the game. I'll have none of this off day from Ireland, albeit it wasn't their strongest. But I just think England came with a plan, and from minute one, it was funny because off camera we were discussing pre-game, just when the nerves were bubbling up, and you were painting the image of fast-paced, bludgeoning carries, England in possession, and Johnny May in the corner. And sure enough, that is exactly what unfolded. And if that were to happen in the first half, that would be the picture of a bad day at the office.
It's the picture of, to credit, and I've always been a lover and defender of Johnny May, even in teams where I'd be chopping and changing that back three all day. I would always leave Johnny May in there, and England do as well, because virtually every time they win games, that's the picture that's created, is Johnny May striding home. And he had a lot more to do than just touch down that ball at the weekend. He was virtually perfect in all areas, defended the backfield.
Nullified Ireland's albeit slightly inaccurate kicking game, but certainly coped with that. They prepared for that all game, and conversely, Ben Young's his particular box kicking game was fantastic. It was on point. It was curious to see. They looked like a team drilled to beat down Joe Schmidt's Ireland, with a slight flavour of playing Joe Schmidt's Ireland at their own game. They were the ones getting the impetus in terms of the collision point in the just off 9 and off 10, and on offense or defense they were making dominant hits. But they were also upping the pace. They were moving the ball really cleverly. Is the other thing, like that opening sort of drive that led to that try. I mean, a lot of people have covered it in so many different angles and nuances to it, but it was just they put great variation on the play. It was instantly dictated by Farrell and Youngs what was going on. It was like a little sneak play down the short side, always with a couple of people keeping the pillars honest, and then whipping it round the corner to the right hand side, catching Ireland's defence eventually, but running really hard lines, but always with options. It wasn't just winning collisions. There was a subtlety to it and a structure to it that was great, and it was one that was bought into by every player on the pitch. I mean, one of the things that can't, it's one of the factors that it's hard to identify how and why it happens. But certain games, certain teams can be galvanised, and then this English team they were so, you could see that they were united and focused in terms of their efforts. Everyone bought into it, and then you got things like the chat out of them, which you could hear through the ref mic on camera. You could just, every time there was a breakdown, every time there was a scrum, there's just noise from every English player bigging each other up and genuinely psyching out the Irish players as well, like calling them out, Murray, I have you. Sexton ball,
roughing Sexton after the tackle as well. I mean, there was just a focused sort of attempt to bully the bullies.
It was organised because they came with that game plan, and like nothing will instill confidence other than that first attacking set at blitz at super pace with super physicality, ending in a try that they no doubt were like looking to exploit those channels. It was a Billy Vunipola managing to get his hands free, no ruck instead, goes out wide. The Ireland system that we do bite in, and they expose that way. They have perfect passers of a ball to expose that out wide, and perfect finishers out there when they get there. And it's like, as soon as you see that happen, 7-0 straight away, you're in the Aviva, they're in the game, and Ireland are rattled, and that just didn't change for the remainder of the game. It was England.
Yeah,
really.
I don't even think Ireland were necessarily rattled by it, even at that stage. They go back to their process and their systems, but it was not going to be a day for that. I mean, England just kept playing really well. They explored the kicking game is the next big thing. I mean, they have a lot of good kickers of a ball in Daly and Slade outside of Farrell and Youngs. Farrell and Youngs obviously were at the heart of it, but that was so key to tearing Ireland apart in the early part of the half. Like, as much as you talk about winning the collisions up front, and they did, the fact that when Ireland were kicking the ball, they were getting it so wrong, and when England were kicking the ball, they were getting it so right. It just left Ireland's pack having to turn, being on their heels all game. You know, having to orchestrate defensive lineouts and defensive plays and exits instead of getting on the front foot. And that was a huge part of the first half, that England just, every time Ireland kicked, it was quite sloppy, and England would return with a perfect kick that isolated obviously Ireland's weaknesses, which we'll get into when we're talking about them. But first credit where it's due, and like you touched on Slade there as well. Obviously his own try was a lovely validation for having him in there, where it was like a perfectly worked move in the midfield to expose that defence of Ireland, just to get it wide past Farrell, so that all the forwards that are focused on Farrell are now frozen out, and the wide men have to push out into those tram lines, and then another skip pass which wasn't forward, was called into question unduly, but was a perfect pass. And then seemed like it was a planned move for May to chip it over the oncoming fullback who was trying to close the door. Onside as well.
Oh, he was. That was a perfectly legit try, and that was the game-winning try. That was what.
It was also just the tackers out of them. I mean, first from Ireland's defensive perspective, the sort of narrowness of them. I don't like, in terms of as a solution to the 2015 problem, bringing the wingers up was good, bringing the wingers into the line, but what's the point in doing it if you're going to be so narrow again? I mean, it's falling into that same old trap of like, let's make them make the pass, let's make them make the killer play, and then they do, and that's what England did. I mean, as much as it was a great plan from Eddie Jones, the tackers out of the boys was something else.
They have to be able to execute it.
That try in particular, Farrell to Slade to...
No, it wasn't Farrell, it was Youngs to Slade.
You're right, skipping Farrell to Slade. Slade with just instant catch and give, perfect pass.
Exposed how narrow we were and gave Johnny May just that space.
First phase, and then a perfect kick in behind, well chased by Slade.
And Tuilagi was also there, so it was like it was obviously a set move. They were pushing forward for it, and it was a perfect strike play from the midfield, which we all like. We were crediting Stockdale's try last November as being like a perfect example of this. This was an England team that did their homework, found where the weaknesses were, worked it all week, and really did execute it. And like even things like selection, because their centres, they really did work. It looked much more like a balanced thing. Like we were like half worrying that they were going to go forward Farrelling again, which is not what we recommend for any kind of England team. As much as it has utility and it can be quick, like Farrell is one of the best 10s in the world, as we saw at the weekend. He was imperious in everything he did, so allow him to make the decisions and have a centre partnership that is big and physical in Tuilagi, which was like, even on a game by game tactical point, cancelled out like your Bundy Aki option of a carry. That would never really happen from Ireland. Again, we'll get into what Ireland did or didn't do, because I think there are still question marks about how that centre pairing would defend, purely because we didn't seem willing to try and test them in that area.
It remains to be seen. There's plenty of things to do.
But that being said, they brought the pressure. That pressure led to mistakes, including Slade for the intercept try as well. That was really poor, like risky play in the 22. But it's coming from pressure and no time and no space, so like,
and no shape,
yes, disappointingly so. But the other side of it is you were zeroing in on their offensive breakdown, which was massive. That was the big problem with their season last year when
I was watching the game back, and this is what I talk about, like a team that's galvanized, buying into a system. It was every breakdown, and it was two players, one from either side of the breakdown, were in instantly, quick ball, go again. And it was every breakdown. It didn't matter who the two were most of the time. There was a pod that was set of forwards, but it didn't matter. If someone wasn't there, someone else got in, like clockwork. Two forwards, great body position, in over the ball, quick ball every time. And that was the whole first half. Pristine ball for Ben Youngs to work with, and it was just they kicked on from there. I mean, that's what the halfbacks need.
That's it. And it was like they were controlled in their offloading game as well. It was only really Billy Vunipola and a few, like one or two other things. Mako got one or two away, but mainly they were going for that because they had those pods there. But it's like the first try, the very quick Johnny May try. Yes, it was Keith. There was a defensive error from Keith Earls. Also one from Conor Murray not coming out into the line. It was a bit broken, trying to shut that down. But I was zeroing in on Toner, who had a chance to get his hands in, who was there, and Billy Vunipola, and then elected instead to rejoin the line, and that allowed Billy Vunipola to not go down but to pop it out, and then no ruck, quick ball.
It's one of those
exactly
curious ones. I mean, if he sticks around and Billy V goes to deck and then he's offside and then the ball comes quickly around the corner.
It's true, but I just feel like Billy Vunipola is there, and we've said this before. It's like a lot of where their system broke down last year when they didn't have him in the team. It's like a lot of it is a bit staggered when he isn't able to win a contact and get his hands free, and it means it's like even quicker ball because you don't have to set that ruck.
Your game breakers are key. That's you gotta have that. You gotta have them for when things do stagnate, and that's where I think Billy Vunipola is probably going to become even more integral as the championship goes on. As they do have off days, that's going to be a guy you go to
hoping
get
he stays fit and gets a run together, because this side of the World Cup he is key. But their pack is already taking good shape, and we were calling for more Saris in there, but I was actually impressed, like refreshed with what I saw as far as their back play to get into the wide channels. They were utilising some screen type shapes. That was
like Farrell is so comfortable with it. That's part of it.
Yeah.
But there was like for the second try, the Elliot Daly try.
Yes. Yeah.
It was a screen, forward screen set up. Billy V I think gave the pass in behind to Farrell, who then gave the screen in behind.
Yeah.
But like what I love, it's just options.
Yeah.
Because the defence can't commit to anything because there's options always. If the defence drifts out onto Daly, who was coming round to receive the second screen, there was that short ball option, which would have been on a weak shoulder, go forward ball, we go again.
Yeah.
And Farrell is so great at making those decisions in real time. Yeah. He's probably the best at it.
Yeah.
It's just it's a cracking little system that they have in Saracens that nobody has figured out how to defend yet.
No problem. Well, yeah.
Really, I mean, outside of a couple of games, maybe it's been a source of continued success for them as an attacking shape for 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah,
and it's great to see it. You've seen it implemented in parts in England, but from Farrell is so comfortable.
Like you do see a lot of teams try and shape out that way, but sometimes it's just not selling the options as well. This is where the balance was upset in that England team for too long, when there was Ford and Farrell there, and it's like, sure, there may be a short line being run, but it's not really convincing, and the defence isn't held or committed by it.
Even if it's given to Slade at centre, I think they're back in their one-on-one to make that tackle, whereas if it's Tuolagi running that line,
that's the point. I was going to say that was another side of that first try. It was Tuolagi who was skipped, and it was Tuolagi who Earls was trying to get man and ball, because he knew that was the only way he was going to stop Tuolagi, because his presence in that line makes defenders doubt. And it gives Farrell, which is your preferable option, more time, more options, and what he does for Saracens week in, week out is just assess that situation, choose the right option, execute the pass or the kick, and both were viable all day long. And England just really did boss it. Like, even I can have no complaints. At half time I was like thinking we were fortuitous to be as in the game as we were. I thought England left some points out on the park when we were really, really struggling in the first half. And in the second, I think we can pivot into some of this Ireland stuff as well, because that did feed into this England performance. Like, they didn't adjust.
No, there was lots bad about Ireland. Just for starters, I'm not sure if anybody watched it outside of Ireland, but Alan Quinlan's commentary on the try, the Slade try, was crazy, and he wouldn't stop calling the ref on it, and then after the game he continued to do it. And I mean,
I just wash my hands of that. That's not how we saw the game at all, or that moment. Like, for what it's worth, we both saw try, and it was try.
And for what it's worth, Cian Healy was 100% held up, and John Cooney's late, score flatterer was definitely a forward pass. They didn't check it, but Nugget's little pass was definitely forward.
Sean Cronin it was a great play from him. It was a classic Cronin play through the middle from the ruck. He does tend to struggle when he's at pace with that particular pass. This pop pass, it leaks forward. I thought that was forward too.
Absolutely,
I thought we were just lucky to be in anyway in that game, and we weren't even. England,
on a plus side, it is like Ireland teams of old that were poor teams, and it's just one of those factors. Like the All Blacks always struggling with us somewhat and not cutting loose against us. Is that on reputation alone, we're not getting stuffed even in bad performances, or we're not getting put up to perhaps the way we deserve to. Like, certainly in that game, in years gone by, that would have been your 42 sixes or your, and it ended up being a 12-point loss, which it's nominal in value really, but it prevented us from being overtaken by England in the world rankings, that last try.
Interesting.
But it's much of a muchness, but it's an interesting point that just they're amongst the big boys now, and teams have a weird tendency to grudge almost too much respect, and while it is true England tired, Like, we were just not good value for a 12-point loss. We were better value for a 25-30-point loss. Such was the dominance. I mean, in every area they had us.
They were superior.
And they were
like
clinical.
Tactics. They played the game much smarter than we did, which is rare enough to say about a Joe Schmidt side, but he got a lot wrong. I didn't care for just a few things we were doing. Like, in the first half, we were insisting on like Sexton would take it up. Well, most of it was off Murray to try and get go forward, which we weren't getting. But then prematurely it would be whipped out under immense pressure to quite a deep Bundy Aki at first receiver, skipping Ringrose to Sexton to try and get on the outside. It's a play that worked once, and 2 or 3 other times didn't really pay any dividends. And it was just like Ringrose felt like he was being frozen out of the game, even though of all those centre options, Ringrose is the superior passer.
Yeah, that's a consistent problem. And I tell you what, like, Ireland, like, as much as they love their structure and their shape and their everything else, like, they're gonna have to give players liberty to make game-breaking players, and, you know, embolden the guys who can do it as well. Because Gary Ringrose, as you say, was quite frozen out, and there were a couple of opportunities, a couple of sniffs. You know, one where you know, it was when we were about 7-3 down and we were working our way back into the game before we retook the lead. There was some decent shape to Ireland's attack. They had worked in Bundy as the other distributor,
and tried to get Sexton wider to be providing for people like Stockdale in the wide channels, which is like, it's a thought, it's an interesting thing. It gets him away from some of that English pressure.
There were just a couple of occasions, like when Bundy threw there was a bit of space out wide, and Bundy went for off his left hand, you know, a long looping pass.
And it was sort of meant for Stander, but then it was also sort of behind him, and it was like Josh had to
drifted along the floor, and Josh failed to collect it, and it ended up being an English scrum. And on another occasion, there was Robbie Henshaw was put in the position off, I think, a scrum of throwing the ball to where there was a bit of space. It was Gary and Earls on the outside, and he threw like a long looping pass to Earls, which completely checked Earls' run, and he ran right back into contact. And then on a third occasion, there was actually a bit of space for Henshaw and Earls. There was about 15 metres of space in the wide channel. This is all in the first half, and it was 2-on-2, and they just really couldn't
execute.
You know, it was sort of Henshaw tried to put a bit of shape on it, and defender was just watching him, and he popped it on, and it was tackle. And it's just, for elite teams to have so little bite and so little danger out there. The most dangerous player is Gary Ringrose, who in all 3 of those, which were barely sniffs of opportunities for Ireland, he was just never put in the key role when he's actually the guy who's probably most likely to make the play. And then the other thing that you have to consider is you know, why aren't more of, because they exist in this country, why aren't more of them there? Why aren't there more playmakers in the side? I mean, the one we're going to harp back to is the decision, which, you know, in our eternal defence in advance of the test, we had recorded the show as we are this week before the teams were named. So we didn't get to cover.
Didn't see that one coming.
Didn't see it coming at all.
Robbie Henshaw at 15. Didn't predict that.
The story broke, I think, the morning after we shot the podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
So I was kind of taken aback by it, and I was a bit nervous by it. But, you know, Joe had said, you know, he's been slotting in, and since Australia, you know, he knows the systems, he knows the shape. So I was like, okay, we'll see what happens. It was a terrible, terrible call. It remains a puzzling call, and it's one they should abandon. The guy's not played fullback at this level.
He's also one of the best centres in the world. I think he's our best defensive centre that we have. He used to play fullback. Yes, he's a roaming athlete. He was found wanting a lot. It puts a lot on, because Rob Kearney, as we've said before, does more in defence than any other fullback at test level. Like, he covers so much ground, and if we're going to persist with that system, which we did, just changing the personnel to Robbie, that's so much to ask of him, especially when you have Youngs and Farrell and Slade all with a decent kicking game to expose that. And it's
all
just
on
like
the front foot as well. It was terrible for him.
It was a rough day. And the other thing that was very frustrating, and this is calling like into questions Joe's, like, because all of our talk has been about building depth since the last World Cup, building depth, which we've successfully done in a lot of areas, bled a lot of players. But things like Conor Murray had probably his worst game in a green jersey in years. I can't recall him having a worse performance, but like in terms of, he was in the defensive line often in positions of use, and then just not making the play.
He was sort of floating around. They had him in the backfield from pretty early on,
where
but then every time a kick came up that was his to take, there was a couple of occasions when Henshaw was coming flying in behind him and told him to get out of the way, and then missed the ball. That was just sort of, you know, young buck wants to make an appearance, and it didn't work out. But he doesn't seem to defend with any kind of authority. He was lingering in the wide channels. He was semi at fault for both of the tries in the first half, in the sense that you talk about Earl shooting out of line, probably did so because he checked his run.
But the whole line pressed forward while he came back, and that was where the gap appeared.
Stockdale the same. When Stockdale came forward into the line, you could argue that Murray was the guy had it covered anyway, but he was so sort of at sea that Stockdale felt he had to come up, and then the kick came in behind. So there's a lot you can isolate that was going badly for Murray.
As well as when we had the ball, being off pace, his kicking game was off, which is what we built a lot, and in terms of our inability to change the way we exited in the second half, that was one of the most disappointing things. But it was also like we played the game against the All Blacks without Conor Murray to try and trust those the other options at 9. So like when you see a player having a game like that, like even if he is Conor Murray, he was having a shocker, and he was all over. He was not at the pace of it, and it's like it took till the 70 plus minutes before that replacement was made, and then instantly we looked more dangerous. The pace was quicker. Even that, like Cooney, I'm not arguing he's a superior player, but he's an option that changes the picture. And the picture was so wrong for so long and going so wrong. And you were making the point that you felt we should have played off Sexton a bit more, which we didn't anyway in the first half as a game plan. It was all off 9, and a lot of those passes I felt like were where they normally are bringing runners onto the ball, they were checking our runners and just getting chopped by the advancing Englishmen. It was a really poor performance from 9, which I don't like saying because I do really love Conor Murray when he's on his game. But I'm just making the point. It's like we need to be making those himself and Henshaw were both clear changes to be made. And there was Cooney as an option for Murray, but there was either Larmour or Carberry, both of whom have game time this season at fullback at club level. And in Larmour's case, started an international game at fullback in November. And it's like those guys that have been playing that position. Robbie Henshaw, yes, has played it a few years ago. Maybe is more in the Rob Kearney mold, but like certainly in terms of covering those things, I would rate Carberry as the most. If we're talking about the backfield, he's the guy who can kick off either foot. He's a guy who has played a lot of rugby at 15 as well as 10.
He never looked better than when he was at 15 for Leinster. It's an absolute curious one. From the Henshaw selection, for starters, even when it was going wrong, you'd like to see them make the adjustment. It didn't make much sense in because it was essentially like you can say he's in the same mold as Rob Kearney, but what we discovered is just nowhere near as proficient at doing all the brilliant defensive work that Rob Kearney does. But Rob Kearney, like you never see him caught for pace. You very rarely see him caught for pace in the backfield because he's so clever where he puts himself.
His positioning,
like he just those balls that were bouncing behind Henshaw, he just doesn't let that happen to him. You just never see that from Rob. That's not a picture you're used to, unless it's going dead, in which case he'll just slowly trot after it,
jog back at the right pace,
and dot it down. But like that proficiency wasn't there, and then.
Everything became untethered then, because then Jacob Stockdale looked unsure on his role, and Keith Earls looked unsure of their role because there was no generalship from Henshaw.
So from a defensive perspective, it was no better, and indeed much worse. And then from an offensive perspective, like we have Rob in as a defensive player. Robbie didn't solve that solution. So what you'd like to see at least is you make the adjustments on defence, you bring a couple of wingers back, change your shape somewhat, and then bring in a fullback who can offer something from an offensive perspective. And Henshaw just wasn't that guy.
He's another centre. He's means we have three centres on the pitch.
He doesn't have the pace either from fullback to really threaten on counter-attack or anything else. I mean, you saw the Larmour as the guy who's got the experience at test level. Like I would lean very strongly for the reasons that you're outlining for Joey Carberry. I think
as Leinster fans, we've seen when Sexton and Carberry are on the same pitch at 10 and 15, it adds so much, and it just brings those wider players in. It would have led to Gary Ringrose being more of an option because the defence has to adjust to worry about Carberry at the back as well. It creates a more balanced look to the offense, we would feel, and it was also just a change that was crying out to be made, like the one at scrum half. It's like if we do have those players, but I think when it's going wrong, why can't we make those changes?
I think the issue
sooner?
with scrum half was probably because it was John Cooney, and I don't think that Joe Schmidt necessarily trusts John Cooney. I mean, he's had him fourth in the pecking order all through last season. He didn't draft him in despite his great year at Ulster. He never really rated him at Leinster. I feel like if it was Luke McGrath or Marmion on the bench, he probably would have made the call earlier. But it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake. I think
like in a game when it's going that wrong and nothing's changing, because at around 60 minutes that was the picture before, like just as England were running in their game-winning score, there was a lot of Ireland sets in our own half trying to get out, and the only exit we had was slow, laborious plays leading to rushed box kicks or just inaccurate.
Joe's
box
Ireland
kicks.
has also never liked the second distributor. You know, he has his general and lieutenant in Sexton and Murray, and he likes to play off them. He likes Sexton to be the quarterback. He likes him to run the plays. You throw another distributor in there, all of a sudden that's another decision maker. It's it's another more potential mistakes. But I think more and more as teams front up to our pack and start targeting our halfbacks, you're probably going to need that extra option. And certainly when you go behind in the game, you need to be able to vary your play. You need to be able to throw some new shapes into your attack. You need to give their defence pause when they're rushing out. Reasons to be, tentative
Doubtful.
somewhat and doubtful.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we were rushing on Sexton. He's flicked it in behind to Carberry, who has a couple of runners he can use. Throws a bit of footwork in there. I mean, Ireland at their best last year, when you look at that Jacob Stockdale try that they got against England and Twickenham, I mean, that was with Joey and Gary Ringrose were two integral parts of that.
Yeah.
Joe Carberry was on a 10 for a blood sub, and there was just every contact had a bit of footwork on it.
Yeah.
A bit of something on it, and there was always a couple of men outside. You didn't quite know where the ball was going to be, and it just left the defence that slight bit flat-footed.
Yeah.
Now, they did have a bit more time in that game, but
it's
part of that had to do with winning those contacts, and winning those contacts isn't just a brute force thing.
No.
It's also got to do with shape and structure, and giving guys the ability to have options and then put a bit of shape on it. Just give anything to give a defender pause.
It's true,
and all of that was missing. And a second distributor may become necessary if teams start to figure it out.
We need to be this is we've often called into question what happens when Joe Schmidt's Ireland go comprehensively behind and have to force their way back in the game, and the answer by the evidence of that game is not much. Because we really don't play that way. It's very methodical, very laborious, and when wins come, it tends to be physical domination first, 3 points, 6 points, 9 points try, and we're out of sight and holding people at bay. And that's all very well. That's an ideal scenario for any game, for any team, obviously, is to just work your way into a lead and hold it. But it's not the way all games go, and in a tournament that's going to be a lengthy process against many different kind of pictures and different opposition, which is what the World Cup is all about. There needs to be more shapes to your attack, and you need to be able to dig yourself out of holes.
It's why Ireland are deservedly not ranked ahead of the All Blacks in spite of November's result, because as much as we've had our doubts about the All Blacks in recent years, they still have that blink and they'll score.
Ability to just instantly go the
length. And that's
danger.
Killer. So because they're never out of a game. When Ireland had you felt they were never in that game. You felt they could never get back into that game. You just didn't see the picture.
No, it's true. Ireland, I'm sure I've heard criticism of this Ireland team from supporters of many other countries and all of
Tyndall's and
and I understand the criticisms in terms of it being very boring, and you can kind of look at the back line and think there's not much going on there. These boys, but what ends up happening in a lot of those games is that they're so clinical, so professional, and then so physical.
And listen,
that they get the win and can control as far as tempo was concerned as well, which is always a point in a game. It was England's tempo from minute one, and Ireland struggled with that tempo and never were able to impose their own.
Indeed. But they're as much as it's easy to piggyback on the criticism of Ireland from the weeks gone by, Ireland's game plan has never just been when we talk about shape, it's never been an absence of shape. The shape was absent last week, but their go forward ball over these years has not been generated just by one out runners. It hasn't. They occasionally you'll see a Tiger or someone like that break through, but for the most part, I look at the second test against Australia last summer as a great example. Just Sexton had the ball, and granted they weren't faced with the same level of defence that they were at the weekend, but there were guys running switch lines off him. There was a guy on his inside shoulder, a guy on his outside shoulder, a guy out wide, and then Sexton was just pulling the strings and making the plays and picking the right option virtually every time. And then occasionally, just once or twice he just went for it when they drifted off him. And he was just constantly presenting with pictures that have equations that have so many different variables that they couldn't cope. But that's Ireland at their best, and you definitely, I feel like another distributor is going to be necessary just because of the degree to which they went at our gain line ball, which everything comes first from our gain line ball. Get a bit of quick ball, then give it to Sexton.
And that was a picture he never got in his defence. And this the difference between this test and that one was just Sexton was coming onto the ball. The defence were a little bit slower up. England were on him from minute one all game, But you were right in saying like we weren't playing our right players into it as well.
Yeah.
There was like things like that intercept try. There was no shape there, and the pass was still going. So like
there's also the galvanization. You know, we used it as a point against about that England game, like that Ireland game. That was for me, it was one of their best performances, probably their best performance, maybe apart from the All Black game last year, that second test against Australia. And it was the week after they'd been defeated, and they'd been defeated by the Pocock factor.
Yeah.
So they were so focused on the offensive breakdown. Every time that grey scrum cap got in off the ball, they were killing him.
Yeah.
And that was generating the quick ball. And you didn't really see much of that. Everything was reactive. Everything was sort of staying the shape. You definitely didn't get the feeling that they were sort of up for that physical, exchange.
Yeah,
the way
whereas
that
England were.
They were,
and that's where it's easy to harp on that for too long. But what essentially happened was England were the ones knocking them off that, because Ireland are and have been an exceptional team and phenomenal. So it was a really great effort for England to shut them out the way they did and unnerve them the way they did, and just have the options running dry while England's were all very viable and they were picking the right ones. And it was just it was a consummate dyed in the wool total English victory, and they were good value for their bonus point, even though it was regrettable to gift them it in such a fashion. But they were definitely good value for winning 5 points to 0 on that front, because that was just the difference between the teams. So I'm not sure if we've anything else to add on that one. I mean, it was we're obviously biased, we're Irish fans, and first and foremost, we like to see us dominate World Rugby going forward forever. But if you put those green caps off for a moment, it throws both this tournament and the World Cup. To have an England team, it's what we've been begging for. And the questions are still there as to whether they can maintain it, as to whether they can fix their breakdown issues, their centre issues, their defensive issues going forward. This is definitely, though, a step in the right direction.
Hugely
as well as a great coaching, tactical masterclass from Eddie Jones. Got a lot right, and the playmakers got a lot right, and it was just a total victory.
There's absolute value in just a brilliant one-off performance. To know you have it in you. And then the question now becomes, can they maintain it, and can they impose themselves? Can they perhaps go on and win this tournament now? 5-0 win in Dublin. You'd have to ask why not. Obviously they've got the big game again in Cardiff coming up. But an absolute massive stepping stone. And in terms of going forward, in terms of fixing those problems, Farrell's at 10. Doesn't look like that's going to change. That's huge. Billy Vannapola's back. Manu Tuolagi's back. They just look to have an actual centre partnership. They're moving the ball in the right ways. They're defending way better with way more aggression. You'd hope that that's not just a function. Sometimes Ireland defend really well for one big game. Brodie Retallick got such hassle in the same way that our boys got such hassle from the English team. Is that something they're going to be able to maintain? There's still question marks.
Yeah, there's still big games to come.
The foundation within even this Eddie Jones squad, which I wouldn't have said maybe even a couple of weeks ago, the foundation is there to actually it's not those glaring issues of Ben Teos and no flankers. There's a little more positivity in there.
Yeah, definitely. So
a lot more.
Yeah, no, it was a brilliant performance. So we're gonna tip our hats to them across the water. Fair play. You got us, and it was totally deserved. Great win.
Yeah. What can I say?
Thanks for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you want to subscribe, there should be a button up here. Don't forget to give us a like and share with your friends. And please leave comments down below. We love the conversation. Thanks.